Hi, I'm Emily. I pulled into the driveway of our suburban Seattle home, the tires of my beat-up Honda crunching against the gravel, the sound sharp in the quiet dusk. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with the promise of rain, and the air carried that crisp October bite that makes you pull your jacket tighter. Today was my 30th birthday, a milestone I'd imagined would feel like crossing some invisible finish line into adulthood. Instead, it felt like a storm was brewing, one I couldn't quite name. I reached for the small cake box on the passenger seat, a $15.00 vanilla sheet cake from the corner bakery, the kind with too sweet frosting and a crooked "Happy Birthday, Emily" scrawled in red icing. I hadn't bothered to correct the teenager behind the counter. It was just for me, anyway. No party, no candles, no one to sing. Just a quiet nod to surviving another year in a house that never felt like mine. The craftsman-type house loomed ahead, its cedar shingles weathered from years of neglect, the porch light flickering like it was on its last breath. I'd been paying to keep that light on, along with the electricity, the internet, half the mortgage. For years, I'd poured my paychecks into this place, into my parents, Mark and Susan, who seemed to think my existence was a debt I owed them. I stepped out of the car, the cake box balanced in one hand, my keys jangling in the other. The wind tugged at my scarf, and I shivered, not just from the cold. Something felt wrong, like the air itself was holding its breath. Inside, the house was too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. The kitchen lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow over the chipped formica table where dinner waited. Meatloaf, soggy green beans, and instant mashed potatoes. A meal as uninspired as the people who made it. My parents sat there, Mark at the head like some self-imagined king, Susan fussing with her napkin, her eyes fixed on her plate. I set the cake on the counter, the plastic bag crinkling louder than I meant it to. "You're late," Mark barked, not looking up, his voice gravelly from years of whiskey and resentment. I shrugged off my coat, hanging it on the hook by the door. "Work ran late," I said, keeping my tone flat. "Had to finish some reports. No apology, no warmth, just facts." Susan didn't speak, her fork scraping against the plate like a metronome. I sat down, the chair creaking under me, and the tension in the room coiled tighter. We ate in silence, the clink of cutlery the only sound breaking the void. No happy birthday, no acknowledgement of the day I'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. I pushed a clump of potatoes around my plate, my stomach knotting. I should have known something was coming. Mark wasn't the type to let silence fester for long. Halfway through his meal, he slammed his fork down, the sound like a gunshot. Susan flinched, but I froze, my pulse spiking. He leaned back, his eyes locking onto mine, cold and unyielding. "You're too old to be leeching off us," he said, each word deliberate, rehearsed. "It's time you got out." The words hung in the air, sharp and surreal. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard, that this was just another of his drunken rants. I glanced at Susan, waiting for her to contradict him, to soften the blow like she sometimes did. But her lips were pressed into a thin, bloodless line, her gaze fixed on the table. "I pay the internet," I said slowly, my voice steady despite the chaos in my chest. "The electricity, half the mortgage, groceries. I'm not leeching," Mark laughed, a short, cruel bark that stung worse than his words. "Paying a few bills doesn't buy you a free ride, princess." Princess. The nickname he used to whisper when I was 6, curled up in his lap after a nightmare. Now it was a weapon, twisted to cut. My throat tightened, but I didn't let it show. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment outburst. They'd planned this, waited for my birthday to make it hurt more. The cake sat on the counter, a pathetic symbol of my naivety, the plastic handle stretched from the weight of the box. I pushed my plate away, the meatloaf untouched, and stood, their eyes tracking me like hawks waiting for prey to break. They expected tears, a scene, something to justify their cruelty. Instead, I nodded once, sharp and final. "Got it," I said, my voice ice cold. Mark smirked, like he'd won some invisible battle. Susan's shoulders slumped, shame pooling in her posture, but not enough to make her speak. Not enough to stop me from becoming disposable. I walked to the stairs, pausing by the counter where the cakes sat. One candle was missing, probably jostled loose in the car, but it felt like a metaphor for everything I'd lost. I grabbed the box and climbed the stairs, each step creaking under my weight, the sound echoing the finality of the moment. In my room, I closed the door and leaned against it, the hollow thud matching the ache in my chest. This house wasn't mine. Maybe it never had been. I set the cake on my nightstand, the frosting's sickly sweet smell filling the air. Without thinking, I pushed it off the edge. It hit the carpet with a soft thud, the box crumpling, icing smearing across the beige fibers. Happy birthday, Emily. I sank onto the bed, staring at the half-packed suitcase I'd been avoiding for weeks. Part of me had known this day was coming, a slow bleed of realization over years of being their safety net. The memories came unbidden, sharp and bitter. The time Mark's truck broke down, and I drained my savings, money I'd scraped together for my own apartment to cover the repairs. No thank you, just a grunt as he drove off. The winter Susan slipped on black ice, totaling her car. I skipped a week of work to buy her a new set of tires and pay for the tow, only for her to hand me the repair bill with a pat on the hand saying, "You're such a good girl." Last spring, when the roof leaked, I was the one on the ladder in a downpour, hammering shingles while Mark sipped beer inside, muttering about shady contractors. None of it mattered. None of it earned me a place at their table tonight. I pressed my hands against my eyes until stars burst behind my lids. The sadness was there, but it was hardening into something else, something colder, stronger. I stood, grabbing my phone, and moved downstairs, my steps soft out of habit. In the living room, the TV's blue glow painted Mark and Susan in eerie light. Mark lounged in his recliner, a fresh beer in hand, while Susan sat stiffly on the couch, her eyes distant. They looked untouched, as if they hadn't just shattered my world. I stood in the doorway, waiting for something. A glance, a flicker of regret, nothing. Mark noticed me first, raising his beer in a lazy salute. "Don't forget to turn off the lights when you leave," he slurred. "You're not paying for them anymore." The words hit like a physical blow, erasing every sacrifice I'd made, and I didn't respond. I didn't scream or beg. I turned and climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last, the weight in my chest crushing. In my room, I closed the door and pressed my palm against it, sealing off the part of me that still believed family meant loyalty. My laptop sat under the bed, a lifeline I hadn't touched in hours. I pulled it out, the screen's glow cutting through the darkness. My fingers moved with purpose, years of paying their bills making the motions automatic. I logged into the utility portal, electricity, water, gas, all in my name. My finger hovered over the cancel button, trembling for a split second before clicking. Confirmation flashed, payment method removed. I did the same for the internet, the cable, the cell phone add-ons. Each click was a cord cut, a tether severed. The joint bank account was next, the one Susan insisted we keep for emergencies. I transferred my remaining funds to a private account I'd set up months ago, when a quiet voice warned me this day would come. Transfer complete. I paused over the auto insurance. Mark's truck, Susan's battered Camry, both under my plan to save them money. "You're so good with finances, honey," Susan had cooed last year. "It just makes sense." I clicked remove vehicle on both, my heart pounding, not with fear, but with a grim satisfaction. When I closed the laptop, the silence in the room felt different. Lighter, sharper. This wasn't revenge. It was survival. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows, a reminder that winter was closing in, and I wouldn't be here when it hit. I glanced at the crumpled cake, the icing a sad smear on the carpet. I didn't clean it up, let it stay, a mark of their betrayal. Downstairs, the TV droned on, a laugh track mocking the quiet war I'd just started. I wondered how long it would take for the lights to flicker out, for the heater to sputter, for their world to unravel without me holding it together. I wasn't sticking around to find out. But the night wasn't over. As I packed the last of my essentials, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You think you can just walk away? Watch your back." My breath caught, the words chilling me more than the October wind. I checked the locks on my window, my pulse racing. Was this Mark's doing, or something darker? I shoved the phone in my pocket and grabbed my keys. I needed to get to Claire's, but the driveway was empty. My car was gone. Panic surged as I ran outside, the gravel biting into my sneakers. The street was dark, my Honda nowhere in sight. A low laugh echoed from the shadows near the garage, and I froze, my heart hammering. Someone was watching. I sprinted back inside, locking the door behind me, my hands shaking as I dialed Claire. "My car's gone," I whispered when she answered, "and someone's out there." Her voice was calm but firm. "Stay put. I'm coming to get you." As I waited, the house creaked, each sound amplifying my fear. Headlights flashed through the window. Claire's Jeep. I grabbed my suitcase and bolted outside, the cold air stinging my lungs. As we sped away, I glanced back at the house, its silhouette looming like a predator. A figure stood in the driveway, too distant to identify, but their presence sent a shiver down my spine. At Claire's downtown loft, I collapsed onto her couch, my suitcase at my feet. The city lights glittered outside, a stark contrast to the darkness I'd left behind. Claire handed me a mug of coffee, her eyes fierce with loyalty. "You're not alone in this," she said. "They don't get to win." I nodded, but the text from the unknown number burned in my mind. Who was watching me, and what did they want? I opened my laptop, double-checking the cancellations. Everything was set to shut off at dawn. But as I scrolled, an email notification popped up. A security alert from my bank. Someone had tried to access my account. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about eviction anymore. Someone was coming for me, and I had no idea how far they'd go. The next morning, Claire's building lost power, plunging us into darkness. The elevator groaned to a stop as I headed out for coffee, trapping me in a metal box that felt like a coffin. My breath hitched, claustrophobia clawing at me. I pounded on the doors, my voice echoing in the small space. After what felt like hours, the maintenance crew pried the doors open, and I stumbled out, gasping. Claire was waiting, her face pale. "This isn't a coincidence," she said. "Your parents are playing dirty." I didn't want to believe it, but the timing was too perfect. Back in the loft, I checked my phone. Another message from the unknown number. "You can't hide." My hands trembled, but I refused to break. I'd survived their betrayal. I could survive this too. That afternoon, as I walked to a nearby diner to clear my head, a black SUV swerved toward me, tires screeching. I dove onto the sidewalk, my knees scraping the concrete, the car speeding off before I could see the driver. My heart pounded as passers-by stared, but no one stopped. Was this random? Or was someone sending a message? Back at Claire's, I pulled out my folder of evidence receipts, bank statements, proof of every dollar I'd poured into that house. I wasn't just fighting for my freedom. I was fighting for my life. As I organized the files, a loud crash came from the alley below. I peered out the window, my stomach dropping. A trash can lay overturned, and a shadow moved in the darkness, too quick to follow. Someone was out there, and they weren't done with me. By evening, I sat at Claire's kitchen table, my laptop open, my resolve hardening. I wasn't just cutting ties. I was building a fortress. Every receipt, every payment, every sacrifice was a brick in the wall I'd use to protect myself. But the threats were escalating, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being hunted. Who was behind the texts, the car, the shadow? Was it Mark, Susan, or someone they'd hired to scare me? The city outside buzzed with life, but I felt like a target, exposed and vulnerable. Claire sat across from me, her voice steady. "You're stronger than they think," she said. "Let them come. You're ready." I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me. Was I ready? Or had I just started a war I couldn't win? The Seattle skyline glittered outside Claire's loft window, a mosaic of lights that felt both comforting and mocking. It was past midnight, and the city's pulse thrummed below, oblivious to the war brewing in my life. I sat at her kitchen table, my laptop casting a sterile glow across the scattered receipts and bank statements, my arsenal of truth. The threatening text from the unknown number still burned in my mind. You can't hide. My car was gone, stolen from the driveway of the house I'd been evicted from, and the near miss with the black SUV earlier that day felt like a warning shot. Someone was watching me, and the power outage that trapped me in Claire's elevator wasn't just bad luck. It was a message. My parents, Mark and Susan, weren't just kicking me out. They were trying to break me. Claire slept on the couch across the room, her steady breathing a small anchor in the chaos. I envied her ability to rest while my world unraveled. My phone buzzed, shattering the silence. Another message from the unknown number. "You'll pay for what you did." My heart thudded, but I forced myself to breathe. I wasn't the scared girl who'd climbed the stairs of that house a day ago, cake in hand hoping for a scrap of love. I was done begging for a place in their lives, but the fear lingered, sharp and cold, like a blade pressed against my spine. I screenshot the text, adding it to the folder labeled Evidence. If they wanted a fight, I'd give them one, but on my terms. By morning, the city was draped in a gray mist, the kind that clings to your skin and blurs the edges of everything. Claire's building was still without power, the elevator out of service, forcing us to take the stairs. As we descended the dim stairwell, a faint chemical smell hit me. Gasoline, acrid and out of place. At the bottom, a puddle of liquid glistened under the emergency lights, trailing toward the parking garage. My stomach twisted. "Claire, stop," I whispered, grabbing her arm. She froze, her eyes narrowing as she followed my gaze. "That's not water," she said, her voice low. We backed away, my pulse racing. A gas leak in a high-rise was bad enough, but this felt deliberate, like someone wanted us out. Or worse. We called the building manager, who evacuated the complex while firefighters swept the scene. Standing on the sidewalk, wrapped in Claire's spare jacket, I scanned the crowd. A figure lingered across the street, hood up, face obscured. When I blinked, they were gone. The firefighters confirmed it. A small puncture in a gas line, not an accident, but sabotage. The police took our statements, but their questions felt routine, their eyes skeptical. "Any enemies?" one officer asked, pen poised over his notepad. I hesitated, the weight of the truth heavy on my tongue. My parents' faces flashed in my mind, Mark's sneer, Susan's silence. But I couldn't say it. I shook my head, mumbling, "No one specific." Claire shot me a look, but said nothing. Back in her loft, power restored but nerves frayed, she poured us coffee and sat across from me. "This is escalating," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "You need to hit back, Emily, hard." I nodded, my fingers tightening around the mug. She was right, running wasn't an option anymore. I opened my laptop and pulled up the local community's Facebook group, where Mark had already started his campaign to paint me as the villain. His latest post was a festering wound. Some daughters are raised to be grateful, some turn into snakes. After all we sacrificed, our daughter left us sick, starving, abandoned. The comments were a mixed bag, some offering prayers, others hurling insults at me. Ungrateful brat! Kids these days have no loyalty. My hand shook as I read, the words cutting deeper than I expected, but buried among the noise were quieter voices, ones that remembered. Didn't Emily pay their bills for years? I saw her fixing their roof in the rain while Mark drank inside. The truth was there, waiting to be amplified. I spent hours organizing my evidence, screenshots of utility payments, bank statements showing mortgage deductions, emails confirming I'd funded repairs to keep their house standing through Seattle's brutal winters. Each document was a memory, a sacrifice I'd made without expecting gratitude. The time I worked double shifts to cover Mark's dental surgery after he cracked a tooth in a drunken fall. The winter I bought Susan new tires after she skidded off the road, her thank you a fleeting pat before she handed me another bill. The years I skipped vacations, birthdays, dreams to keep their fragile world intact. I wasn't just their daughter. I was their bank, their handyman, their safety net. And they'd thrown me out like trash. Claire leaned over my shoulder, her voice fierce. They're writing your story for you. Don't let them. Her words lit a fire in me. I wasn't the villain they wanted the world to see. I started drafting a post, clinical and unemotional, laying out the truth. Screenshots of payments, each dated and stamped with my name, bank records showing thousands funneled into their mortgage, a timeline of sacrifices from missed opportunities to late-night overtime. At the end, a single line. When they asked me to leave, they didn't just lose a daughter. They lost the person who kept their lights on. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the post button. Once I did this, there was no going back. The town would see the truth, and my parents would have nowhere to hide. I clicked. The response was slow at first, a few likes, a private message from an old classmate. I always wondered why you stayed so long. Then it exploded. Shares, comments, neighbors chiming in with stories they'd kept quiet for years. I saw Emily shoveling their driveway alone at 16 while they yelled from the porch. Mark bragged he never paid a cent for bills once she got a job. The tide was turning, and I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. My phone buzzed relentlessly, texts from friends, former teachers, even strangers. But then a new message from the unknown number. You'll regret this. My blood ran cold. I showed Claire, who grabbed her phone and called a friend at the police station. We need a trace on this number, she said, her voice all business. I nodded, but doubt crept in. Was this worth it? Or had I just painted a bigger target on my back? That evening, Claire insisted we go to the Capitol Hill Harvest Festival to clear my head. The air smelled of caramel apples and wood smoke, the square alive with kids in costumes and brass band music. I stayed on the edges, avoiding the crowd, but I couldn't escape the whispers. That's her, someone murmured. The one who abandoned her parents. Mark was there, near the pumpkin carving booth, his voice loud enough to draw attention. My daughter turned her back on us, he bellowed. After everything we did, she left us to rot. Heads turned, some nodding sympathetically, others exchanging skeptical glances. Claire nudged me. Don't, she whispered, sensing my urge to confront him. I stopped, forcing myself to breathe. He could play the victim, but the truth was out now, and it was spreading. As we wandered past the booths, a woman I vaguely recognized, one of Susan's church friends, stepped forward. Her hand was gentle on my shoulder. "You deserved better, honey," she said softly. "We all knew. We just didn't say it." Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them away, murmuring a thank you. For the first time, I felt seen, not as the ungrateful daughter, but as the woman who'd carried her family's weight for too long. The moment was shattered by a loud crash nearby. A stack of hay bales had collapsed, narrowly missing a group of kids. People screamed, and I caught a glimpse of a hooded figure slipping into the crowd. My heart raced. Was this another warning? Claire pulled me away, her grip tight. "We're leaving," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. Back at her loft, I couldn't shake the image of the figure. My phone buzzed with a voicemail from Susan, her voice trembling with crocodile tears. "Emily, please, this is a misunderstanding. Your father's not well. Call me." I deleted it, but another came from Mark, his tone venomous. "You think you've won? Family always gets the last word." I silenced my phone, my hands shaking. Claire sat across from me, her eyes fierce. "They're desperate," she said. "That's why they're lashing out. Keep going." I nodded, but the weight of their words lingered. Then a knock at the door. Sharp, official. My stomach dropped. Claire opened it to a police officer holding a manila envelope. "Emily Carter?" he asked. I nodded, taking the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a lawsuit from Mark, accusing me of theft, emotional elder abuse, and financial abandonment. It was a tantrum dressed in legalese, but it hit like a punch. Sank onto the couch, the papers crumpling in my hands. Claire read over my shoulder, muttering, "Unbelievable. They're trying to destroy you because you stood up for yourself." Guilt flared, that old voice whispering I'd gone too far, that I should have stayed quiet. But then I remembered Ryan's text, my cousin's blunt warning, Susan's planning to fake chest pains if guilt doesn't work. It was a con, not regret. I stood, shaking off the doubt. "Not this time," I said aloud, my voice steady. By noon I was on the phone with a legal aid office in Seattle, explaining everything, calmly, methodically. I emailed them my evidence, every receipt and statement. "You have a strong case," the paralegal said. "You could countersue for exploitation." I didn't want revenge, but I wanted my life back. That afternoon I filed a formal complaint outlining years of financial manipulation under emotional coercion. The process was grueling, but each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. As I left the legal aid office, a man bumped into me on the sidewalk, his shoulder hitting mine hard enough to make me stumble. "Watch it," he growled, his face half hidden by a baseball cap. Something about his voice felt familiar, but he was gone before I could place it. My heart pounded as I hurried to Claire's Jeep, parked a block away. Inside, I locked the doors, my breath shallow. Was he one of Mark's buddies, or just a stranger? The paranoia was eating me alive. Back at the loft, I found a threatening note slipped under the door. "Back off, or you'll lose more than your car." Claire called the police, again, but I knew they couldn't do much without evidence. I added the note to my folder, my resolve hardening. The next day, at a crowded cafe where I was meeting Ryan for coffee, Mark showed up, his face red with rage. "You're tearing this family apart," he shouted, drawing stairs. I stood my ground, my voice low but firm. "You did that when you threw me out." He lunged forward, knocking over a table, coffee spilling everywhere. Ryan pulled me back as the barista called security. Mark was escorted out, but his glare promised more trouble. The incident left me shaken, but it also lit a fire. I wasn't backing down. 2 days later, I stood outside the police station, legal papers in hand, flanked by a volunteer advocate. Inside, Mark and Susan sat at a battered table, looking smaller, angrier. The officer explained their charges wouldn't hold. My evidence was too strong. Mark's face turned purple, his chair scraping as he stood. "This is a witch hunt," he snapped. Susan sobbed, her cries echoing off the walls. I didn't flinch. The officer turned to me, his voice quiet. You did the right thing." Outside, the autumn sun was blinding, the air alive with possibility. I walked away, each step lighter, the courthouse shrinking behind me. The next weeks were a blur of rebuilding. I signed a lease for a small apartment in Capitol Hill, a brick building with creaky floors and drafty windows. I furnished it with secondhand pieces, a faded couch, a wobbly table, each a symbol of my new beginning. One night, unpacking a box, I found the plastic cake topper from my birthday, the one that marked the end of my old life. I placed it on a shelf, not as a wound, but as a trophy of survival. A card slipped under my door one evening. No return address. You were never the problem. Some fear those they can't control. I didn't need to know who sent it. The truth was mine now. As I sat by my window, the city lights glowing below, I realized family isn't blood, it's respect, trust, kindness. I'd lost the one I was born into, but I was building something better. The threats hadn't stopped, and I knew Mark and Susan weren't done, but I was ready. The question lingered: who was behind the gas leak, the stolen car, the shadowed figure? And what would they do next? For now, I whispered to myself, I am enough, and let the world keep turning.